Imagine waking up tomorrow. Your phone is silent. No notifications. No endless scrolling. No friends to distract you. No one to validate your thoughts. For the next 30 days, it's just you. At first, that sounds peaceful. But after a few hours, something strange begins to happen. The silence starts getting louder. Thoughts you've buried for years begin demanding your attention. Regrets you thought you'd forgotten suddenly return. And for the first time in a long time, there's nowhere left to run. Because here's the truth most people never realize. Solitude doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've been all along. And after 30 days alone, you may never see yourself the same way again. Most people believe loneliness is the enemy. That's why every free moment is filled with something. Music, social media, Netflix, conversations that don't matter. Not because they're entertaining, but because they keep us from hearing the one voice we've spent years trying to escape, our own. The truth is, most people aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of what they'll discover when there's no one left to distract them. Because when the noise disappears, your mind begins to speak. It reminds you of the dreams you abandoned because you were afraid to fail, the opportunities you ignored because comfort felt safer, the relationships you stayed in not because they brought you peace, but because they protected you from feeling lonely. And for the first time, you can't change the subject. You can't swipe to the next video. You can't laugh it away with friends. You can't pretend everything is okay. You're forced to sit across from the one person you've been avoiding your entire life, yourself. This is why solitude feels so uncomfortable at first. Not because silence is painful, but because silence tells the truth. It exposes the gap between who you are and who you know you could become. Most people mistake that discomfort for loneliness, but they're wrong. It's awareness. And awareness is where every real transformation begins. Because you can't change what you're unwilling to face. That's why so many people spend years chasing success, money, status, or relationships, hoping they'll finally feel complete. Yet the emptiness never leaves, because no external achievement can silence an internal conflict. Sooner or later, life has a way of removing every distraction, and when that moment comes, the only person left in the room is you. The question is, will you recognize the person staring back at you? The first few days don't feel peaceful. They feel unbearable. You expect silence to calm you. Instead, it magnifies everything you've been trying to ignore. Your hand instinctively reaches for your phone, only to realize there's nothing there to satisfy the craving. You begin searching for something, anything to distract yourself. Not because you're bored, but because your mind has been conditioned to fear stillness. Every notification, every conversation, every endless scroll has been feeding your brain tiny doses of stimulation. Now, suddenly it's gone, and your mind reacts the same way it would if you took sugar away from someone who's consumed it every day for years. It rebels. At first, the silence feels awkward. Then it becomes uncomfortable, then almost painful. Thoughts begin racing through your head. Some make no sense. Others make perfect sense. And that's exactly what makes them frightening. You start replaying conversations from years ago. Mistakes you thought you'd buried suddenly return. Old regrets knock on your door without warning. You wonder why your mind is doing this. But it isn't trying to punish you. It's trying to heal you. Because healing doesn't begin when you feel better. It begins when you stop running. Most people spend their entire lives escaping themselves. They fill every empty moment with noise because silence forces them to confront questions they've spent years avoiding. Am I really happy? Am I becoming the person I wanted to be? If nobody was watching, would I still be living this life? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they're also the beginning of wisdom. Then something unexpected happens. Around the end of the first week, the panic starts to fade. Not because you've found all the answers, but because you've stopped fighting the silence. You begin to realize something that most people never discover. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected. Solitude is the freedom of finally connecting with yourself. And once you experience that difference, there's no going back, because for the first time in years, you aren't escaping your own mind. You're finally listening to it. By the second week, something changes. The silence that once felt unbearable begins to feel familiar. Your mind isn't as restless anymore. The constant urge to check your phone slowly fades. And for the first time in years, you begin to notice things that were always there. You notice how often your emotions controlled your decisions, how much of your life was spent trying to impress people who weren't even thinking about you, how many goals you were chasing because someone else convinced you they were worth chasing. It's a strange feeling, almost like waking up from a dream and realizing you've been living on autopilot. Then comes the hardest part. You start meeting versions of yourself that you've spent years trying to hide. The insecure child who still believes they aren't enough. The angry version of you who never truly forgave what happened. The fearful version who talks you out of every opportunity before you even begin. Most people spend their entire lives trying to silence these parts of themselves. But solitude teaches you something different. It teaches you to listen. Because every insecurity, every fear, every painful memory is trying to tell you something. Not to destroy you, but to show you where healing is needed. And once you stop treating your emotions like enemies, they become teachers. You realize that confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's understanding your fear without allowing it to control your life. This is why solitude is so powerful. It removes every excuse. You can't blame your friends. You can't blame your family. You can't blame your circumstances. Eventually, you're left with one uncomfortable question. If my life stays exactly the way it is, whose responsibility is that? It's a painful question, because deep down, you already know the answer, but hidden inside that answer is something even more powerful, freedom, because the moment you accept responsibility, you also accept the power to change. And that's the moment everything begins to shift. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop waiting for perfect timing. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you. Instead, you begin building a relationship with the one person who will be with you for the rest of your life, yourself. And once that relationship becomes healthy, everything else begins to change. Not overnight, not magically, but permanently. By the third week, something remarkable begins to happen. The silence no longer feels empty. It begins to feel peaceful, not because life has suddenly become easier, but because your mind has finally stopped fighting itself. For the first time in years, you wake up without immediately reaching for your phone. You don't feel the need to constantly prove yourself. You no longer crave someone's approval to validate your existence. And that's when you realize something that changes everything. Peace was never something you had to find. It was something you had to stop interrupting. The world teaches you to constantly chase more money, more attention, more followers, more success. But solitude teaches you a lesson the world rarely does. Sometimes, the greatest breakthrough doesn't come from adding something to your life. It comes from removing everything that was distracting you from yourself. You begin thinking more clearly. Your decisions become intentional instead of emotional. You stop reacting to every inconvenience. You become less controlled by other people's opinions because you've spent enough time with yourself to know who you are. And when you know who you are, the noise of the world loses its power. People will still criticize you. Some will misunderstand you. Others will doubt you. But for the first time, their voices are quieter than your own. You stop comparing your journey to everyone else's. You stop chasing a life that looks good online and start building one that actually feels good when nobody is watching. And that is real freedom. Not having everything you want, but no longer needing the world to tell you your worth. This doesn't mean you become antisocial. It doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop depending on people to complete you, because you've discovered something many never do. The relationship you have with yourself sets the standard for every other relationship in your life. When you respect yourself, You stop begging for respect. When you value your time, you stop wasting it on people who don't. When you're comfortable in your own company, you stop fearing loneliness. And perhaps the greatest gift of all, you stop running. Not because you've solved every problem, but because you've realized that every answer you've been searching for begins with the courage to sit quietly with yourself. The world may teach you how to impress others, but solitude teaches you how to become someone worth respecting. And those are two very different things. By the final week, you begin to notice something that once seemed impossible. You're no longer afraid of the silence. In fact, you've started protecting it, because somewhere between the restless nights, the uncomfortable thoughts, and the endless conversations with yourself, you remembered someone, you. Not the version created by social media, not the version shaped by other people's expectations, not the version constantly chasing approval. The real you, the one that existed before the world told you who you should become. You realized that happiness was never hiding in another relationship, another promotion, another purchase, or another achievement. It was buried beneath years of distraction, and solitude gave you the courage to dig it back up. The most surprising part is that your life on the outside may not have changed much. You still have responsibilities. You still have problems. You still face uncertainty. But something inside you is different. You no longer panic every time life becomes difficult. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth to everyone around you, because you've discovered a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that doesn't disappear when nobody is watching, the kind that comes from knowing I can trust myself. And perhaps that's the greatest transformation of all, not becoming someone new, but finally becoming honest with who you've always been. So, what happens when you spend 30 days alone with yourself? You stop escaping. You stop pretending. You stop searching for your identity in places it was never meant to be found. And slowly, you begin building a life that reflects who you truly are. Because in the end, the person you've been waiting for has been waiting for you too. If this video made you pause, if it made you question the life you're living, or reminded you of someone you used to be, then perhaps that's your sign. Maybe you don't need another distraction. Maybe you don't need another motivational quote. Maybe what you need is a little more time alone with yourself. Because sometimes the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one that happens in complete silence. Master your mind. Transform your life.